Good to go.
Awesome. Welcome to this week's Tech Talk, everyone. My name is Kenzie, and we have with us today the wonderful Nancy Markle, who has been a woman in tech for decades. And she started out in IBM, or when were you in IBM, Nancy?
A long time ago.
She won't tell me the exact time, but it was a long time ago. And she's also like an artist and has worked as a consultant for many Fortune 500 companies, IBM, AT&T, Fannie Mae. We're going to have more of a conversation. She's going to tell us some of the lessons she's learned, some of her interesting experiences, and then looking to feedback from y'all about what areas you are interested in to continue the conversation. So make sure that you know where the chat box is, or feel free to unmute yourself if you have questions. And I will let Nancy take it away. Thank you everyone so much for being here. And here you go.
Great. So I encourage you to ask questions. If you don't understand something, stop me, because that way I'm going to be addressing things that interest you, not just things that I've done. So yes, as Kenzie said, I've been in a number of different companies, and most of my career I was a chief information officer for major corporations. So I started off in technology in IBM. I graduated from college, got a job offer from IBM, as well as AT&T. Professor said, take IBM because they have a great training course. So that's what I did. And I learned a lot, and it's continual. And one of the most important things I learned is if you're in technology, it's going to change. No matter what you know, you're going to be obsolete. So be open to change, embrace change, and constantly learn. So that's one of the lessons that I learned over my career. And when I was managing staff, I also made sure that all of them had the opportunity to learn. And I know you get in a project and you get inundated, and it's so important, and time is of the essence, but I also insisted, number one, that they take vacations, and number two, that they take training. So continually learn, continually look for new ways of using technology. And if you're not interested in change, you're in the wrong field, because it is going to change, guaranteed. So that's one of the important things I learned. I also went back to graduate school to get my graduate degree, and ended up in the class. The professor said, you know more about actual coding than most of us. We know the theory. So how would you like to start teaching? So that's how I ended up teaching at a college level. And it was really a lot of fun, but teaching at IBM was a lot easier because the students, it was their job, and they knew they had to learn in order to continue to have their jobs. Whereas students in college, you kind of have to say, I'm going to give you a pop test. You can't just say, read this, and if you have any questions, come back. You have to say, also, I'm going to give you a pop test to inspire them to read it or code it or do the problems or whatever. So it was much more fun working with people who are in business, who really wanted to learn. So one of the other things that I learned is if you know technology and are willing to learn, you can go into any field that you want. So if you're interested in fashion, you can go into fashion. If you're interested in finance, you can go into finance. If you're interested in retail, you can go into retail, whatever you're interested in. In fact, Walmart has some of the leading technologists in the world. So, you may think that they're with Cisco or Google or Microsoft or Apple, but even Walmart, they really, and they're really leading edge in some of the technologies that they embrace, test and see if it's going to work for them. So you never know where you're going to end up. It's really what your passion is, what you're interested in, and what you have in technology is a foundation to go anywhere you want and to change careers. So I started with IBM teaching computers, got my graduate degree and taught for Penn State. And then I ended up in one of the large electric utilities. I worked for Southern Company and Georgia Power. So then I learned about electric utilities and building nuclear power plants and things like that. So as you move into different businesses, it's really important to learn the business. Knowing the technology is important. And for most technologists, they think that's all there is. But if you really want to grow and you really want to make money and have the opportunity for promotions, you want to learn the business. You want to be able to prove yourself of value to the business. So you want to understand the business, find out what they do, what's important, talk to their customers, talk to the people that you're working with. Find out when you're building a system for someone in the company, get to know them, find out how they work, why they do the things they do, what would make it easier for them. And generally, if it's easier for you to code it, it's harder for them to use it. If it's hard for you to code it, it's easier for them to use it. Now that sounds kind of weird, but as you begin to build projects and do projects for people, you will find that in order to think about all the different things that they encounter, that means that you're doing a lot of work coding. So if you've done it easily and it's taken you no time at all, chances are it's going to need to be maintained, adjusted, and changed. So get to know the people in the business that you're creating for, and make sure that what you're doing is going to be of value, and they're not going to have to work too hard to use it. And remember, you're coding, and lots of people are going to use your code. So it's much more efficient for the company or the organization for you to spend the time making it really good code than for all the people who are using it to spend their time trying to figure out how to use it. And also, what you think is intuitive may not be intuitive for them. It'll depend on the situation they're in and the job that they're doing as to what's intuitive for them. So learn about the business, go work, go spend time with the people you're creating for. And it'll be fun for you to learn about them, but they're going to love having you there and finding out how technology is going to help them. So that's some of the things that I learned. So the other thing that I looked into is, if I'm going to be in technology, one of the things that I wanted was to make a difference in a company. I wanted to be a strategic value to a company. So I said to myself, now what are the companies that technology is really important for? So when I started, technology wasn't as pervasive as it is today. Today, without technology, you can grow crops, but that's about it. There's not a lot of opportunity because everything, especially in the United States, everything comes down at some point to technology. When I started, it didn't, and technology was not necessarily viewed as important. So I figured, well, if I was going to find a job or work in an area where I could be a strategic value to a company, I figured finance uses technology a lot. In fact, they don't use money, they really just use bits and bytes, hence the digital currency. Or technology. Those are the two areas that I thought would give me the most opportunity to be of strategic value. So I went in, I ended up with Fannie Mae, which is the mortgage company, not the candy company. And we built huge systems. They are one of the top, in terms of assets, one of the top companies in the world, because they're handling mortgages. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, that's all they do is mortgages. So when I went to Fannie Mae, they were putting 5,000 loans a month in boxes and had no idea what they had. They were just putting the paper in boxes, and they just didn't know what kinds of loans and how much each loan was and what the risk was. And so our job was to build systems that would give them that information, because they wanted to sell the loans then on Wall Street. So that was huge system, multi millions of dollars that we got involved with, and that became my responsibility. After that, I went to Arthur Young, which then became Ernst & Young, and did consulting. And I did consulting in the financial areas and in utilities, because that's where I had knowledge. But I was consulting in their technology areas. So, and because in utilities, they're highly regulated. So sometimes I was hired by the utility, and sometimes I was hired by a regulatory agency to go in and analyze how well the technology worked, whether it could sustain itself, whether it worked well, whether it was secure, whether it was private, all of the things that are so important in a program. So it isn't just about knowing how to code. It's got to be secure. It's got to work all the time under many circumstances. Testing is so important. But another thing that's really important is being able to work in teams. Because when you get into these big projects, one person can't do it. It's going to be divided, done as a project, and many people are going to be working together to make it happen in many different facets of it. So then you come down to learning project management, which is really important. Learning how to take a big project, break it down into small pieces, be able to assign those pieces, have people work on them, test them, and then you start integrating them, retesting them, making sure under many different types of scenarios that they work. So then I ended up back in finance again, working for the largest savings and loan. And this thing, we were one of the first to really use artificial intelligence in our working environment. So we went from taking loans by hand to putting PCs out there for the loan people who took the loans, and have them feed into the PC exactly all the information about the loan. And then we could show the people if they got a 15-year loan, how much they were going to end up spending in interest versus principal. If they did a 30-year loan, how much they were going to end up spending, doing all different types of loans, and being able to immediately, once we got the basic information in there, show them visually with graphs and charts exactly what was going to happen to the money that they were putting in, and then how it was going to be spent over the years of their loans. So that was interesting, because a lot of the people who were lending agents quit because they didn't want to have a PC. They didn't want to have to learn how to use it. but the company was absolutely adamant that this was going to be their future. And so they said, it's either you learn how to use it or you go find another job. And so what it taught me is how important it was to work with the business, so that I had not only me leading a project, excuse me, I'm going to turn this off. Not only me leading the project, but also I had business leaders in partnership with me. And they had a team, and I had a team. And they were part of not only helping me create the project and test it, but they were also then training the people in the company on how to use it. So it got me out of the training business, and it was much better that the business trained the business because they understood the environment, and I didn't always have as much knowledge about their environment as they did. So they were much more patient, and they understood the questions better than I did. Speaking of questions, hey guys, what are your questions? What are the things that interest you? What do you want to know about?
So I do see a question here in the chat box from Brett, and he asks, do you consider developer positions to be high responsibility jobs?
Absolutely. They are high responsibility jobs, but, and you probably are going to agree with me, testing is also a high responsibility job, because if the thing doesn't work well, I mean, it may work, but if it doesn't work well under many, many scenarios, then it's going to cause a lot of problems. So yes, developing is really important, but also testing and making sure it works and making sure it's secure and building as little hackable as possible. It's impossible not to be hackable, but to do the best you can to make it secure. In some areas, like in healthcare, privacy is absolutely so vital. So if you haven't built it for privacy, then it's going to have to be fixed. So all of these areas associated with developing are all important parts of developing. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, we got the thumbs up.
Okay, good.
And then Priyanka asked, are there opportunities for entering into a part-time role instead of a full-time role?
There are. Oftentimes it takes working full-time first, so that people have confidence that when they turn something over to you, that it will get done on time, on budget, well done. So earning your spurs helps a lot. And once people have confidence in you and you have a good work ethic, then they're not only gonna allow you to work part-time, but they're also gonna say, we don't care where you are. You can be in your home, you can be anywhere, because they trust that you're gonna get the job done. And when you have to work extra hours, you're going to do the extra hours, because if you have a project that's due, then you got to work the time that's necessary to get it in. Because that's the one thing that really people have a problem with, is when you set a deadline, it's not just a deadline for you, it's a deadline for the business, and there are a lot of ancillary things that are going on around it, like training and testing and so forth. So that if it's not on, it can be early, that's always good. But if it's not on time, then you're impacting a lot of other people and you lose credibility. So one of the things that I learned is when people ask me, okay, so when do you think we're going to get this done? And I'd sit down with my team and I'd say, okay, how long do you think it's going to take us? And then I'd double it. So they found out I was doubling it, and they started doubling it. And I doubled it again. And they said, but we've already doubled it. How can you double it again? And I said, well, you think you doubled it, but you didn't really, because then you would say, well, we can probably get this done in 2 weeks. And then you just say, okay, 3 weeks, even though you knew that it was going to be 2 weeks. You didn't really double it. But the thing is, you can always come in early. It's fine. And then you can do a little more testing or add some bells and whistles to the project. Coming in late is not fine. So making sure that you've padded for contingencies, because they always happen. No matter how well you plan it, there are always things that happen. So that's another lesson that I learned. More questions?
Yeah, it's really good insight, Nancy.
Sorry, I was on mute for a second, handling the doggies, or the dog. Adam asked, you stated that being open to change is an important skill to have when entering the tech field. And he was wondering what other soft skills you would suggest that developers should have. And like by soft skills, he was talking about like the non-technical skills, kind of like being open to change, communication, working in a team, things like that.
Yeah. And teamwork is probably the most important. And that I look for on a team, people you respect, but also people with divergent views. So don't look for just people that you. Look for people who have other ideas. I remember one I was working on, we had a guy who was always telling us why it wasn't going to work. And everybody said, Nancy, what? Let's just get rid of him because he is such a naysayer. And I said, no, we're not going to get rid of him because we need to hear why he thinks it will work so we can prepare to make sure that he's wrong. So our job is to make him wrong. And if we don't know what he thinks is going to happen, then we don't know how to make him wrong. So looking for people who think differently than you do so that your coding, your developing is as comprehensive as it can possibly be. Important skill to have. Working with people who aren't like you and respecting them and appreciating their divergent views is really important. So being a part of a team, because most projects require more than one person, being able to test, finding out what it takes to be a good tester, being able to write code that you can document, which technology people hate to do. But you need to be able to do that so that someone coming behind you can fix what you've done if you're not available to fix it yourself. And don't think that you can build things that nobody else can read or fix, and that's going to be job security, because it's not. Someday, somehow, you're not going to be able to be there to fix it, and they're going to hate your guts because they can't figure out what in the world you did. So make it as simple to read and as well documented as you can. And another thing is having other people test what you do and you testing what they do. So because if you've developed it, then you think in a certain way, but somebody else is going to think differently. So they're going to look for different things than what you developed. And it's got to work under those circumstances too. So you want to have, work with each other and test with each other and check out security with each other so that even though you may be sending it to a special testing team, if you can pre-test it before they get it and get most of it working, that's so much better in building your credibility, learning to build good code, than waiting for the testers to find the problem. So in your day, you can code and test it's fast. When I first started, we had to wait overnight before we could get a test. So I used to desk check everything I did 9 ways to Sunday, because if it didn't work when you worked overnight, then you had to work to the next night. Wait till the next night to be able to test the changes that you made. So you couldn't even test the whole thing. If it stopped at some point, that was it. So learning how to desk check the stuff and get it working as well as you possibly can before it leaves your desk. What are the other soft skills? Networking. Get to know people in your field who are not working in your company. Know as many people as you can. Because when you're looking for a job or you're looking for people to be a member of your team, then the more people you know, the more opportunities you have to reach out and find people to help you. I remember when I was working for the Anderson networked within Arthur Anderson, because that's how they got promoted. And so they all knew the people, other people in Arthur Anderson. Well, when the company imploded, when the Justice Department stopped the work on them being able to do accounting work for a period of time, and they put the company out of business, these people were networked within Arthur Anderson, but those people also didn't have jobs. So having a network outside of your company is also important. So because I have always networked, I was able to help a lot of people find jobs because I knew people not just in my company, but people in many other companies. And it's not just because I changed jobs, but also because it gave me the opportunity to change jobs because I knew people elsewhere. And they helped me find jobs. People are always really helpful. Sometimes they help me find jobs when I had a job and I didn't want another job. But it's an opportunity to make a decision when you want to stay where you are or see an opportunity to do something better. So networking is really, really important. And don't think there's anybody that won't be able to help you at some point, because you'll find that there are people you think, oh, they'll never help me, be of use, and they turn out to be one of your greatest mentors or assets. So let's see what else. I guess another area that's really important is outsourcing. So you may find yourself outsourcing some of your code, and that's interesting because oftentimes you're working with people who are in different countries with different ways of operating, different languages, cultures. So learning how to outsource is really important also, and to insource when the outsourcing doesn't work, to be able to bring something somebody else has done back into your company and make it work and figure out all the things that you need to do to make that happen. So, or you may be an outsourcer. Some other company may hire your company to do the work, and you may be part of a team that ultimately will be for totally different company and maybe even a different business. So being aware of outsourcing, but really it comes down to working with people, learning how to work with people. If you just want to code and be locked at a desk, you're also limiting your opportunities to do more and get promoted and work in different organizations. So working with people is really important. Appreciating people is really important. And probably the other thing is recognizing people. I had one young woman I was trying to get promoted, And at Arthur Andersen, it was a partnership. So you had to work with partners in order to get someone promoted. There had to be agreement of a number of people. And when I wanted to promote this young woman, they said, well, why? She's just a good coder. You know, she's not a good team player or anything like that. I said, oh, she's got a whole team. That's what's turning out this work. And they said, well, we wouldn't know it because she took credit for everything. And she didn't recognize the rest of her team. And that was a good lesson for her because I sat down and told her how much trouble I had getting her that promotion because she didn't share the credit.
That's a really interesting story, actually. Thanks for sharing. I like that example of kind of selfishness working against you in that case, because I think there are a lot of issues with that kind of group teamwork coding experience where people often will try and take credit for other people's work. I have another question, a really great question from Nikki. And she's asking like how you would get into a project manager position when you may not have the necessary experience. And I'm guessing by necessary experience, she's kind of talking about knowing all of those technologies that go into a project, but please correct me if I'm making the wrong assumption there. But are there ways to get project management roles without necessarily like knowing all of that technology really well?
The answer is yes, because you're never going to know all the technology. I mean, no matter what you know, it's never enough. So the important thing is when you're a project manager to find other people as a part of your team who know the things you don't know. And always look for the best people you can possibly find. Don't try to get people who you think will make you look good by not knowing as much and you can help them. Go look for the best people, people who are better than you are at whatever it is, because you are only as good as the worst people on your team. So you need to look for people who are going to make you look better. And even if you give them credit, and even when you give them credit, people know that you are the team leader and you're the one responsible, and you get credit vicariously. You get credit for whatever they do. So find the people who are going to do a great job, and you will get credit for what they do, as well as getting a better product. But the more, don't ever think you're going to know everything, because you can't. You just can't. You got to look for people, have friends. Having friends who know things that may not even be part of your project team, but finding out people who do know that you can go to for the answers, because technology is so big and so pervasive. There are always people who know more than you are. No matter how good you think you are, there are always people who are better. And that's one of the things that your entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Eric Schmidt and even Elon Musk, I mean, all these people know that they have to have the best people, because there's going to be somebody in a garage who's better than they are, who's going to be coming up with the next most wonderful thing and put them out of business, make them obsolete. So they have to always be looking for the best people they can find. So always look for the best people. Always never think that you're going to know it all, because you won't.
So would you say that you kind of, I don't know, like networking would be maybe more important to a project management position, and like understanding the methodologies than, or maybe domain knowledge than particular technical knowledge of that project?
It depends on if you're doing a project management role, then your job is to manage the project, not to know how to code in that particular language. You do know how to ask, you do need to know how to ask the question and when you're being bamboozled. So knowing the right questions and knowing whether the answers make sense is important. but knowing how to code it. And that's the hardest first management position job, is understanding that somebody else is doing the coding, not you. It's not your job to check their coding. It's their job to check their coding and the tester's job to check their coding. You can help them out. Your job is to manage the project, to break the project into small pieces, assign the pieces, to assign the dates, make sure that the pieces are brought in on time, that the people have the resources that they need and the time that they need to get the job done. So your job is about project management. And it's really hard. I found that the first supervisory position was always the very hardest position to have. Making that transition from doing to managing is really tough. And if you're doing, you're not managing. So the important thing is to learn how to allocate the work, make sure the work's being done, and to give credit and acknowledgement to the people doing it.
And Nancy, did you prefer the technical side or the project management side?
Well, you know, the problem with the technical side is that it's more limiting. And when you have a view that I had, and that is I wanted to be of strategic importance to an organization, that was my goal, then it was important for me to get into the project management side, because I needed, in that way, I needed to understand the business as well as the coding. And then once you stop coding, you're obsolete. You know, the bottom line is coding changes, technology changes, and you get obsolete really fast in tech, really fast. 6 months and you're done. Somebody else is much better than you are. You may have been the best coder of everybody you know, and you stop coding for a couple of months. There are many people who are better than you are really fast. So I found that if I wanted to become of strategic importance, I needed to know more about the business. I needed to know more about how to be of value to my company through technology. So I spent a lot of time studying the business. I used to even read the journals and newspapers that the business people did, because invariably they were going to read some technical article, not about the technology itself, but about someone who is doing something with that technology. And they were going to say, well, why aren't we doing this? So I had to know what technologies were the sexy technologies of the time that they might want to do, so that I could be prepared to answer it. And if I didn't know the answer, to go find someone who knew the answer, why we wouldn't want to be using that technology right now, and if and when we would want to use it, that type of thing. Because there's always stories in every newspaper and every magazine about some new technology that's going to revolutionize the world, and there's a lot of hype about it. And then the next question is, why aren't we doing it?
I believe artificial intelligence has just entered the chat. I have another question from Brett. He said, if the most important soft skill is to work well with others, do large employers value open source contributions as a demonstration of that?
No, they don't care about open source. They don't care about proprietary. When people sit there and tell me, well, it's open source, so it's so much better and all of this, if you're in tech, you know what that means and how important it is. But if you're a business person and you just want it to work and work for you, you don't care about proprietary, you don't care about open source, you don't care about any of that. So then if you want them to care, you've got to explain it to them and their eyes glaze over. And so they don't really care, and they shouldn't have to care. So while some people have said it's a real asset, and it is a real asset, for them, it's not important. So it depends on who you're trying to impress. If you want to impress another technology person, they know. But if you want to, and you know, why is Apple so successful? And they're proprietary up the kazoo. So people want it easy to use, and that's what's important to them. And what's also important is, this is really interesting because the CEO of when I worked for Home Savings was actuarial, so he really knew technology. And he used to sit me down and say, okay, explain this new technology to me. And I would explain it, and I would make it as simple as I possibly could. And if there was a technologist around, as there often was, they'd say, Nancy, you make it sound so easy. And it's really hard, and you need to have them appreciate how hard it is. And I said, no, if I go into how hard it is, they're not going to appreciate it. They're going to just tune out. You know, they just don't want to hear about how hard it is. They just want to understand what it is. So make it as easy as possible. And then you can end it with, it's not really that easy, but I wanted to make it understandable. But you don't even need to do that. They know. They know if they had to sit down and do it, they would hate it. So they appreciate what you do.
So you're kind of saying that those contributions would be a lot more relevant, like to the technical people that are maybe hiring you, but when you're communicating with HR, maybe not so much. As we've all kind of encountered, there's a disconnect between the technology department of a company often and the hiring department of that company.
And that's a big problem. That's actually a really big problem. And I became friends with human resources in every company that I worked in because they did not understand why technologists made so much more money than everybody else. And so I had to work with them to get the salary price points raised in order to be able to pay a competitive salary. So it was always a challenge for me to get the human resources people understanding what I was asking for and taking that job hiring out of their hands other than reviewing resumes. And then after that, I moved it into my organization because they really don't understand, nor should they. So giving them credit for reducing the number of resumes, but taking it out of their hands ultimately.
I got another question in the chat box from Nikki. They said, with so many technology programs and coding languages out there, how do you keep up with tech in your current position and in the past?
Well, you can't. I mean, all you can do is try. And that comes down to reading a lot, studying it. For example, now I'm very interested in alternative reality stuff. So I read a lot about it. I talk to people about it. And as you talk to people, you learn more and more because people love talking about what they are doing and what they're studying. And then I go to conferences to find out what's the latest happening. But mostly, because of Google, I can find out so much stuff about things that I'm interested in and read about it and get easy answers as well as get into it in more relevancy. But it's just, you're never going to know it all. You just can't. This technology is changing so fast on so many paths that you can know a little bit about a lot of things, or you can know a lot about a couple of things, but you can't do both. So and I chose to know, when I first started, I was a really good coder. but it wasn't long before I wasn't the best coder anymore because I was getting into doing projects and project management. So, and I worked in a number of different languages. Once you learn a language, it's kind of just like speaking languages. Once you know a couple of languages, moving to another language is really easy, and moving to a fourth language is really easy. That movement from language to language gets easier and easier the more you know. So the first language is the hardest. And after that, they get a little bit easier and a little bit easier.
So Nancy, can you talk a little bit about what initially got you interested in technology? And when did you know that it was the career that you wanted to do?
Well, I kind of fell into it when I was looking for a job when I graduated from college. I didn't know anything about computers, but I was a math major. So I had a job offer from IBM based on just general knowledge tests. But in the general knowledge tests and the the math tests that they gave me, I did well on the math. Did well on most of the general knowledge. I did terrible on questions about computers because I didn't know what they were. That's how long ago that was. And so, and then I got a job offer also from AT&T to be the first woman engineer in this area. And I went back to my professor and I said, they're both about equal. What do I take? And my professor said, IBM. It is the best training in the country, and computers are our future. And that's how I found out that computers were our future. So, and boy, was he ever right. So I fell into it, and it's just been easier and easier as I moved. So when I needed to move or whatever, I would start putting out my network that I wanted. Like when I got my job with Arthur Andersen in Sarasota, I wanted to live in Florida. So I started putting out the word that Nancy wants to live in Florida. What kind of technology is there in Florida? And I investigated what was going on in Florida in the different areas. There's a lot of technology going on here. And started my network of people. Well, what do you know about this? And what do you know about that? And that's how I ended up at Arthur Andersen. So it's really, people is what it all comes down to, is people. People helping you, putting out the word that this is what you want to do, not knowing necessarily exactly where you're going to land up, but knowing that I wanted to live in Florida and I wanted to be in technology. So I ended up in technology for Arthur Andersen.
There you go, living the dream.
I am, and I do live in paradise.
There you go. Yeah, no, that's quite the story, and yeah, really good insight for our students.
So do we have any final questions that you all would like to ask?
That's what I was going to ask. Do you have any funny stories from that day, from back in the day that you want to share?
Let's see. Oh yeah, I do. Working for a Southern company, we had a guy on our team. He was really, really a good coder, really terrific. And he could look at your code and tell you all the things that were wrong with it. But this guy smelled. I don't think he ever changed. I think he changed his shirt once a week. And the team came to me and said, what are we going to do? So we put our heads together and we started taping soap, fragrant soap, underneath his desk. Because we couldn't get him to change his shirt. So instead we tried to mask the smell. So you never know what you're going to end up working with. But we got the whole team involved, and they were all trying to think up ways that we could not embarrass him, but still get him to, or at least get us able to work with him. So there's all kinds of funny stories. Working with people is always fun.
Was he a good coder?
He was really good, really good. Otherwise, I don't have a team for him.
Put a lot of sweat into it.
That's my dream, getting good enough at coding that no one cares if I shower or not. Just kidding. There are a couple comments. Adam says, thank you for meeting with us. Appreciate the wisdom. Brett said, thank you for the insights. And Nikki said, thanks for answering her questions and thanks for organizing. And everyone says, thank you. Lots of thank yous.
Well, thank you all, and I wish you all the very best as you move forward. And if you have any additional questions, please reach out to Kenzie because we're really close.
Yes, actually, Nancy is my aunt. So here's my email in the chat. This is reverse nepotism, where I hire her to help me. Yeah, my email's in the chat. It's Kenzie@LearnCodingAnywhere. Reach out to me and I can pass any questions along to Nancy. Feel free to link up with me on LinkedIn as well. And if there's any final questions or comments, throw them at us. If not, thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate everyone being here and engaging. And Adam says, just make sure to wear clean shirts and shower.
That'll get you in for sure.
It's always a good first place to start out from. First job, shower. Second, third, fourth, maybe not so much.
Yeah, well, brush your teeth and shower.
I don't know, you're asking a lot.
Well, in COVID, you just wear a mask, so you're home free.
No need for a shower during COVID.
That's right.
Well, awesome. Thanks so much, Nancy.
It's been a pleasure. I enjoyed sharing with you all.
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. That was really good insight and invaluable for the attendees for the talk, and definitely appreciate you coming out.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing you in actual person sometime.
Yeah, really soon, hopefully. I've been vaccinated, Kenzie.
That's great. I'm so happy for you.
So I don't have to worry about the death threat.
That's what we want.
Die from it.
Well, it is good that it's coming to an end, and yeah, we're all definitely looking forward to being vaccinated, getting life back to normal.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Kenzie, that's a great connection you have there, and I wish I had an Aunt Nancy.
Me too. Well,
all right.
How to get off of here, but I'm thinking record. No, that's it.
Oh, there's a little hang up button at the bottom that looks like a red phone down on the cord, and that's how you get out.